Good day, everyone. Welcome once again to Education 502 Methods of Research. This video lecture is intended primarily for my research students who are taking Master of Arts and PhD in Education at the Graduate School of Eastern Visayas State University. And please take note that I implemented a blended learning modality in my class, combining face-to-face sessions and asynchronous sessions with Moodle as my learning management system. So the pre-recorded lecture or the recorded version of this lecture will be uploaded to my Moodle class soon. And for today's lecture, I'll be talking about writing the methodology in research using grounded theory. So I think this is the last topic in qualitative research design that I will record when I will discuss. And then after this, I'll be recording or making a video lecture on correlational research design, descriptive research design, experimental and quasi-experimental research design under quantitative research. So let's dive right into the topic. But before anything else, let me share something. Um, so for this lecture, I'll be making use of our research proposal titled A Grounded Theory Exploration of How Indigenous Elders in Hamtic Antique Facilitate Learning in the School of Living Traditions. And I have my co-researchers here, Dr. Anisito Cotillas of Cebu Technological University and Professor John Paul Petrola of the University of San Agustin, Iloilo City. So this is to show you that I do not just lecture or discuss topics in quantitative or in qualitative research design um, without the experience of doing these things. So I combine theory and practice. Again, this is to show you that I mastered or I studied the theoretical aspects of qualitative research design, and then I specifically or concretely apply that to our study, to our own research, qualitative research employing grounded theory as research design. So this is the proposal that we have. It's not yet completed, unlike in our other works on the indigenous people in Panay Island. And this research is based on the extension work that we are conducting with the Ati community in Hamtic Antique, titled Empowering the Ati Community in Hamtic Antique Through the Establishment of a School of Living Traditions. So, as you can see, we have here the endorsement and the approval of the Vice President for Research and Development and Extension Services of Eastern Visayas State University, as well as the University President. And I'll show you as well the first page of our extension project. So this is the extension project, and the first page, the executive summary, you can read it if you want. I don't need to read now the executive summary or the first page. This is just to show you that indeed our research is based on the extension project. Now, please take note that this extension project, Empowering the Adi Community in Hamtic Antique, is based on our previous research titled Needs Assessments of the Ati Indigenous People in Panay Island. So as you can see, it starts with research, and then once we have determined the needs of the Ati people, and one of the urgent needs that the Ati revealed in the interviews that we had in that research is the need to establish the School of the Living Traditions, because the argument is their culture and their traditions are now gradually eroded, and so they need to preserve and conserve it. And so after our research, it's now about to be published in a Scopus Index journal. Then we conducted an extension project for that, based on again on the need to establish a School of the Living Tradition. And we started the extension project. Again, this is approved with a budget of 602,000 pesos. After we started the extension project, we developed another research proposal again. That is why this one. a grounded exploration on how indigenous elders and how they can facilitate learning in the School of the Living Tradition. So again, this is to show you that I really do what I teach in my class. And lastly, before I proceed, this is to show you that indeed research, extension, and research is a loop. So we start with research, and then once we have completed the research on needs assessment of the ATI people, and then there are some recommendations there based on our findings and conclusion, and we develop an extension project out of the recommendations that we have. And then once we implement the extension projects based again on the previous study, then another research gap emerged. Again, on that is why again the proposal, the research on a grounded on the exploration of how indigenous elders and how they can facilitate learning in the School of the Living Traditions, uh, using grounded theory as research design. Okay, so let me proceed to the parts of the methodology. There's no one size fits all format or standards in writing the methodology, especially in framing the parts or the components of a methodology. But these are the standard components of the methodology. First is the introduction. So when you write the introduction of the methodology chapter of your research, you need to have that brief introduction, and I'll show you later on the sample and instructions on how to do that. And then we have the research design and instruments, then locale and participants, data gathering procedure, data analysis, and ethical consideration. So, for the introduction part of the methodology, this describes the systematic procedures used in understanding the pedagogical processes and cultural philosophies that underpin indigenous knowledge transmission among the Ati community in our study. Um, Grounded theory, um, on a grounded theory and exploration of how the elders of the Ati community in Hamtik Amtike, um, to the School of the Living Tradition, something like that. And then design an instrument. This explains the chosen research design and detail the instruments used for data collection and ensure that they are appropriate, reliable, and aligned with the study's objectives and research questions. And then the research locale describes the geographical setting of the study and provide a clear accounts of the participant selection, including inclusion criteria and demographic details to establish the context and relevance of the research. And then data gathering procedures, as we know already, outlines the step-by-step process of how data will be actually collected. And then the data analysis explains the methods and procedures used to organize, interpret, and draw meaning from the collected data. And lastly, the ethical consideration demonstrates how ethical principles will be upheld throughout the research process. So again, these are the standard components of a research methodology chapter, be it a qualitative study or a quantitative one. Let me proceed to writing so the next in what follows, I'll be discussing the steps and techniques on how to write each section of the methodology chapter in research using grounded theory. And then what I will do here is read and do some side discussions if necessary, but most of the time I'll just be doing reading and providing you examples on how to write the methodology in research using grounded theory. And if you want to know more about the meaning, nature, and dynamics of grounded theory, I have another video lecture on this. You can refer to the chat box below for the links. Okay, again, so I'll proceed to the introductory part. And in this case, I'm using, because this is my fifth lecture on writing the methodology in research using, in qualitative research. And this is the first example that I used in my previous lesson. So the content here may not directly align to the sample that I gave, but the intention here is to give you some ideas, techniques, and hints on how to write the introductory part of the methodology chapter. So how do we write the introduction of the methodology chapter? There are no one-size-fits-all rules here, but some of the rules of thumb is first, you briefly rehash what the study aims to do. So in this example, it reads, this chapter presents the methodology employed to explore the lived experiences of first-generation college students navigating academic life in a university setting. So I use this again example in my previous lectures. Just use it here for practicality's sake, for convenience sake. So after rehashing what the study aims to do or the overall goal of the research, you may proceed to stating what type of method and design will you employ and briefly explain why. And so, for example, it reads, a qualitative phenomenological research design was chosen to capture the personal meanings and interpretations of participants' experiences. And after that, we provide a brief rationale for choosing this design and how it aligns with your research questions. For example, it reads, this approach is appropriate as it seeks to understand how individuals perceive and make sense of their educational journeys. The study focuses on uncovering common themes and essences through in-depth interviews. And lastly, after stating the first three, then you need to set the stage for the subsequent sections by outlining the chapter's focus on data collection and analysis procedures. So, for example, you may say, this chapter details the research design, participants selection, data collection methods, ethical considerations, and the procedures used for analyzing and interpreting qualitative data. So, this brief introduction to the methodology chapter of your research is a must, I should say, so that the discussion on the presentation or the discussion on each section of this chapter will not appear abrupt. So you need to set the mood for the writing of this chapter, and this is some of the techniques of some of the rules of thumbs in doing it. Okay, so this is how we right, this is some of the techniques in writing the introduction of the methodology of your chapter, or the methodology chapter of your research. Let me now proceed to research design and instruments. Again, please take note that most of the time I'll just be reading my notes and giving you examples based on our own study, employing grounded theory. I may do some side discussions along the way, but most of the time I'll be just reading and showing you some samples. So how do we write the research design and instrument section of a research which employs grounded theory as design? First, explain the chosen research design by identifying it as as by identifying it as qualitative, and then employs grounded theory, and then justify its appropriateness by showing how it enables the development of theory from participants' lived experiences, meanings, and teaching practices within their cultural context. For example, it reads, our own study employing grounded theory research design. It reads, this study employs a qualitative research design using the grounded theory approach to explore and theorize how indigenous elders in Hamtik, Antique facilitate learning in the School of the Living Tradition. Grounded theory is appropriate for the study as it seeks to generate a theory derived from the lived experiences and perspectives of indigenous elders who serve as the community's cultural educators and knowledge bearers. Through this design, the research aims to uncover the underlying processes, meanings, and patterns that define indigenous ways of teaching and learning. And then second, describe the data collection methods by specifying the qualitative techniques that will be used, such as in-depth interviews, participant observation, and field notes, and explain how each method will capture the participants' experiences, teaching practices, and cultural interactions in an authentic and context-sensitive manner. For example, It reads, data will be collected through in-depth semi-structured interviews, participant observation, and field notes. The interviews will elicit detailed narratives of the elders' experiences, teaching strategies, and reflections on the roles in sustaining cultural transmission. Open-ended questions will allow participants to freely express their insights in the preferred language, which ensures authenticity and cultural sensitivity. Participant observation will be conducted using SLT sessions to document teaching interactions, rituals, and community engagements. These observations will help the researcher understand learning as it naturally unfolds within the community context. And the third, explain how data will be documented and analyzed by identifying the instruments that will be used, such as field notes, reflexive journals, and audiovisual recordings, and describe the analytical process, which includes the use of the constant comparative method with open, axial, and selective coding to develop a grounded theory. For example, it reads, field notes and researchers' reflective journal will serve as complementary instruments to record contextual details, nonverbal cues, and the researcher's reflections throughout the process. Audio recordings, photographs, and video documentation may also be used, with consent, of course, to preserve the integrity of the data. Data analysis will follow the constant comparative method, which includes open, axial, and selective coding. This will lead to the emergence of a grounded theory on indigenous learning facilitation in the School of the Living Tradition, or SLT. And so if we combine the three paragraphs that I just read or presented, the research design and instrument section of our proposed research reads or looks like this. So I don't need to read um, uh, this section. Again, I just read and presented this a while ago. So this is how our research design and instrument looks like. Okay, so let me proceed to the next section, which is the research locale and participant section. So how do we write or prepare this section? First, describe the research locale by providing its geographical location, cultural and historical background, and its relevance to the study, and then highlight how the Ati community in Hamtik Antique and its School of Living Traditions embodies the cultural and educational context being explored. For example, you may say, or our paper reads, this study will be conducted in Hamtic Antique, one of the oldest municipalities in Panay Island, Philippines, known for its rich cultural heritage and thriving indigenous communities. Specifically, the research will focus on the Ati community, which houses a School of Living Traditions, the one we established there, a community-based learning space where indigenous elders transmit cultural knowledge, oral traditions, and traditional skills to younger generations. The locale is significant because it embodies the living continuum of cultural identity and educational practices that persist despite the pressures of modernization. And then second, identify and describe the study participants. And then specify the inclusion criteria and explain the sampling method that will be used, which highlights why these participants, such as Ati indigenous elders in the School of Living Traditions, are suitable for providing meaningful insights into the research focus. Right, so let's see it. Okay. For example, wait, it goes back. For example, our study reads, participants of the study will consist of active indigenous elders who actively serve as cultural bearers and teachers in the SLT. The inclusion criteria require that the participants, first, are members of the Ati community in Hamtic Antique. Second, have at least 5 years of experience facilitating cultural learning within SLT. And third, be recognized by their community as respected elders or tradition holders. Purposive sampling will be used to ensure that The selected participants possess deep cultural knowledge and lived experience relevant to the study's objectives. And then I cite Corbin and Strauss there because I don't, invent this idea. I borrowed the idea of Corbin and Strauss. So supports, of course, our claim. So their narratives and reflections will provide invaluable insights into how indigenous pedagogies are sustained through intergenerational learning within the School of the Living tradition. And then if we combine the two, the locale and the participants, the two paragraphs that I just read and presented, this is how the research locale and participants section of our study looks like. Again, I don't need to read this again. If you can take a screenshot of this if you wish for your reference when writing the methodology or the research locale and participant section of your research. And then let me proceed to the data gathering procedure. How do we write and prepare this section of your research? Again, employing grounded theory as your research design. First, explain the ethical and methodological foundations of the study or of the data gathering process by identifying the qualitative approach used, which also outlines the necessary approvals and consent procedures, such as in ICP approval and free prior informed consent or FPIC, and then emphasize adherence to ethical standards and respect for the indigenous community's cultural integrity. For example, it reads, the data gathering procedure of this study is designed in accordance with the principles of qualitative research and the grounded theory approach, which emphasizes systematic data collection, constant comparison, and theory generation based on the participants' lived experiences. Before data collection commenced, formal approval will be secured from the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, and the free, prior, and informed consent process will be conducted to ensure ethical compliance and respect for the Ati community's autonomy and cultural integrity. So if you refer to my other lectures on how to write the methodology in research, employing narrative design, case study design, phenomenological research design with the indigenous people in Panay Island, you can refer to my other lectures. So we provided there because we have completed research on the indigenous people employing case study and narrative design. I showed in that lecture how we secure permits from the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples and how we conducted, and prepared the free, prior, and informed consent. So in this case, this is just a proposal. The study is still in the proposal stage. We are about to still to undergo the process of securing permit again from the relevant authorities like NCIP. And then second, describe the main data collection methods such as semi-structured interviews, participant observation, and field notes, and explain how these techniques will be implemented to capture the participants' authentic experiences, which ensures cultural sensitivity, informed consent, and accurate transcription for analysis. For example, it reads, or our proposal reads, the primary methods of data collection will include in-depth semi-structured interviews, participant observation, and field notes. Semi-structured interviews will be conducted with Ati elders who serve as culture bearers and teachers in the School of Living Traditions. Each interview will explore their teaching practices, experiences, and reflections on transmitting Indigenous knowledge. Open-ended questions will be employed to allow the participants to express their perspectives freely and in their preferred language. So as just a side discussion, every time we conduct study with indigenous people or we do field work, we always have the transcription in their mother tongue. So in this case, Hiligaynon, or the language of Iloilo. So when we conduct the interview, we use um the Hiligaynon because we have John Paul Petrola, our research partner from the University of San Agustin, speaks Hiligaynon. So the interview is transcribed in Hiligaynon, and then we translate that into English. Let me proceed. So as we can see, this will ensure authenticity and cultural sensitivity. Interviews will be audio recorded with consent, of course, and later transcribed verbatim for analysis. And the third, explain how participant observation will be conducted by describing the setting, focus, and purpose of the observations, and specify the use of complementary instruments such as field notes and a reflexive journal to capture contextual details, nonverbal cues, and the researcher's reflections for deeper understanding. So please take note that, especially in qualitative research, when you're conducting the interview, some members of the team must also be in charge of the field notes or the interview notes. That is why in our case, when we conduct the interview, we need to have the research assistants. Normally, we are at least three in the group. Because if I am facilitating the interview, my concern is simply to facilitate the interview, and then somebody is in charge in making sure that the video recorder is working well, and then another member of the team is in charge with the interview notes and doing some kind of, observation during interviews, because we also need to take note of the nonverbal cues of the members in the group interviews or the interviewee in the case of one-on-one interview. Okay? So, for example, it reads, participant observation will be carried out during SLT sessions and cultural events to capture the natural flow of teaching and learning within the community context. The researcher will also document real-life interactions, rituals, and pedagogical processes, which allows for a deeper understanding of indigenous educational dynamics. Complementary instruments such as field notes and reflexive journal will be used to record contextual details, nonverbal cues, and the researchers' insights throughout the process. So, if we combine the three paragraphs that I just read and presented, the data gathering procedure of our study looks like this. Okay, so I don't need to read that one, as I already read that, each chapter or each paragraph rather. So let me now proceed to the data analysis part. So how do we write and prepare the data analysis of, again, the methodology of a qualitative research that employ grounded theory as design? First, explain how the data will be analyzed by identifying the use of grounded theory approach, and then describe how data from multiple sources will be transcribed and then organized and analyzed concurrently. Also, emphasize the constant comparative process to ensure that findings reflect participants' authentic experiences and perspectives. For example, it reads, the data analysis in the study will follow the systematic procedures of grounded theory approach, which aims to develop a theory grounded in participants' lived experiences, meanings, and social interactions. Data collected from semi-structured interviews, participant observation field notes, and the researcher's reflective journal will be transcribed, organized, and analyzed concurrently to allow for constant comparison and iterative refinement of emerging concepts. This process will ensure that analysis remains closely tied to the realities and voices of the anti-Indigenous elders. Second, describe the step-by-step data analysis process by explaining how constant comparative method will be applied, which entails the stages of open, actual, and selective coding, and then clarify how memo writing will support the development of categories and the construction of a coherent grounded theory. For more on coding and thematic analysis and other things or other techniques and steps in doing the data analysis part, I will be preparing another lecture for that purpose. Take note, I am still on the research proposal part, so I'm still in the methodology part. So later on, when we go to the body, the results and discussion, when we process the data that we have gathered, and let's say for example we employed thematic analysis, I'll show you how we do thematic analysis, the manual thing. Okay, but at this point, we're still again in the methodology part, in the data gathering procedure parts of our research. So, for example, our study reads, the constant comparative method will guide the analysis, beginning with open coding, where data will be broken down into discrete parts and examined for significant concepts and patterns. Each line or segments of the transcript will be coded to identify recurring ideas related to teaching practices, cultural transmission, and community-based learning. Next, actual coding will be used to relate categories and subcategories and then identify relationships among themes such as traditional pedagogy, intergenerational learning, and the role of cultural values in the school of living traditions. Finally, selective coding will be conducted to integrate the major categories into a coherent theoretical framework that explains how indigenous elders facilitate learning within their cultural and social context. Memos will be written throughout the analysis to document analytical insights, reflections, and evolving theoretical connections. And then third, explain the strategies that will be used to ensure the trustworthiness of the data analysis, such as triangulation, member checking, and prolonged engagements, and then describe how these methods will strengthen the credibility and reliability of the grounded theory developed from the study's findings. I would just like to preempt the discussion on the data analysis parts on the proper and ethical way of conducting the data. Please take note that after we gather the data from, in this case, the indigenous community, so from the communities, if your study involves field work, so when you transcribe the interviews and your field notes, and then process it and then analyze it through thematic analysis, for example. And then once we have the findings in its raw form, please take note that we need to go back to the community and present that findings to our participants themselves. That's what we call member checking. This is to ensure trustworthiness. We need to make sure that our interpretations, that our analysis is indeed in line with the thoughts of the ideas, the real uh, perspectives of the participants themselves. So this is one of the mistakes of many researchers, especially those that involve field work. That after they went to the community and gathered the data and process it and write the findings, and that's it. Not without consulting, without doing some member checking, without showing that to the indigenous community. So when I was young, I during my first research, I failed to do that, and I realized that that was unethical. So now that I have matured and I know how that I have mastered at least the basics in doing fieldwork or qualitative research, I really make sure that I showed the results in, no, in its raw form of my study to the participants themselves. Okay. Anyway, for example, it reads, to ensure trustworthiness, the study will do triangulation of data sources, member checking, and prolonged engagement within the community. These strategies will enhance the credibility, transferability, and dependability of the emerging theory. The final grounded theory will represent a conceptual understanding of indigenous learning facilitation rooted in multicultural traditions, which demonstrates how elders serve as custodians of knowledge and sustainers of community identity through the school of living traditions. So, if we combine the three paragraphs that I just read and presented, the data analysis section of our proposed study looks like this. So, again, I don't need to read this. Just take a screenshot if you want to make this as your reference when writing the data analysis of your research, in case you employ grounded theory as research design. And lastly, let's talk about ethical consideration. How do we prepare these parts? Um, First, describe the, or this just one um, instruction on how to do this, or step in doing this. Describe the ethical considerations by outlining the approvals and consent processes that will be obtained, which also explains how participants' rights, confidentiality, and cultural protocols will be respected. And then emphasize adherence to ethical standards when working with indigenous communities. For example, the ethical consideration of our study reads: the study will strictly adhere to ethical standards in conducting research with indigenous communities. Prior to data collection, formal approval will be obtained from the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, and the free, prior, and informed consent process will be implemented to ensure voluntary participation and respect for the Ati community's rights and autonomy. Participants will be fully informed of the study's objectives, procedures, and their right to withdraw at any time. Confidentiality and anonymity shall be maintained by using pseudonyms and securely storing all data. The researchers will also practice cultural sensitivity by observing community protocols and ensuring that findings accurately represent the voices and lived experiences of the Ati elders in the School of the Living Traditions. So again, please take note that this is our fifth study with the Ati indigenous communities in Panay Island. So we have completed three studies already, and for the securing of approval with the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, again, in my previous lectures, like how to write the methodology in research using narrative design and phenomenological research design and case study design. I showed there pictures and proofs of how we secure approval from the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples in Region 6 in Iloilo. And I also have some proofs there on how we conduct free, prior, and informed consent. So this is just to show that indeed we followed ethically the proper protocol in doing research with indigenous peoples. In this case, I don't have pictures to show you because this study is still in the proposal stage. So after this, when we are done with the proposal and when we secure grant from either Cebu Technological University or Eastern Visayas State University, then we will proceed to securing of the approval from NCIP and then conduct free, prior, informed consent with the ATI people in Hamtic Antique and other, processes protocol that we need to follow. Anyway, that's how we write the ethical consideration for this study. So thank you very much. I hope you learned something from this video lecture. And if you want to know more about how to write the methodology in research using narrative case design, narrative design, case study design, phenomenological research design, and what's the other one? You can refer to the description box below. I provided the links there. Thank you very much and have a good one.